little overview of what we actually have. And slide. So here at the MGC, we have the SGSM has provided access to ArkivDigital. That's the complete collection of ArkivDigital. And for anyone who doesn't know, that's the definitive website for Swedish research. It's all of the church records that exist today. In addition to that, there are over 100 other collections on ArkivDigital. They have 90 plus million of images, and so there are court records, there are prison records, there are photographs of homes and people, there are just a plethora of information. Essentially, everything that the basic researcher, Swedish researcher, would need to do research. And so that's a great resource. If you don't have it at home, that's a great thing to have here. We also have access to EmiWeb, which is a collection of databases. Let me show you. This is essentially what ArkivDigital looks like. They're beautiful color images of all of the records that they've gotten. There are images like these on Family Search and on Ancestry, but they are in black and white. They're in older images from even some of the earliest microfilm, so from the 40s and 50s even, and the quality is so much better here than the images on like Family Search or Ancestry. EmiWeb has essentially anyone who left Sweden during the primary migration from the 1850s to about 1940, they're somewhere here on EmiWeb. You can find your ancestor having left Sweden. It's not always easy. There are a lot of different databases, and going through all of this would be like going through ArkivDigital. It's beyond the scope of what we can do today, but it's certainly a great resource for finding your immigrant ancestor. But recently, in the last 6 months or so, the Swedish Genealogical Society has purchased a number of databases. They're not online. They're only on the one computer that Virginia pointed out and Jan pointed out in their videos, the one computer in the library. And they're really useful resources for genealogists. And I'm going to show you examples of them in just a second, but let me run through the primary ones. First, there's the Swedish death records, 1830 to 2020. That is 99.9% of all Swedes who died between 1830 and 2020 are on this list. You can get information. They're not images. These are just an index, but it is virtually everyone who died, and there was a record of their death someplace, is in this database. And I see we have a question. I'm gonna show you exactly. I'm gonna open that up, and what a brilliant lead into. But let me go through the rest of the databases. Swedish Burials from 1500s to 2012. This is not as complete. It's probably about 97%, but pretty darn complete, of all of the headstones that are extant. The problem, of course, in Sweden is that headstones don't usually last for too long unless the people are famous or the family keeps up. They've got a family grave or something like that. So this tends to be a little bit less valuable, but if you're if you're a gravestone collector, as a lot of genealogists are here in the United States, this is the definitive resource for finding that. Beyond that, there's the Stockholm's Röteman records, and for anyone who has Stockholm research after 1860s or so, these are the records that you have to use. They don't have household examinations like the rest of Sweden, so they have these Röteman records, and I'm going to show you what they look like. I will say that the Röteman records are also in ArkivDigital, so you can see them there also, but there are some advantages to using this program over ArkivDigital, and I'll get to that. Swedish census records. There are Swedish census records going from 1860 up to the year 2000. That's 2000. So you can actually get census records if you're trying to find relatives over there. It's only 22 years ago that you'll be able to find where they were living. So this is a great resource to find current Swedes. In addition to those, we have a collection of Walloon contracts. Walloons were miners who came from Wallonia, down in the Belgian area, French-speaking people who came to Sweden in the 15 and 1600s. And genealogists tend, for those who don't know Walloons, they tend to find it kind of prestigious to have Walloons in your ancestry, and they had a lot of kids. So if you came from the middle part of Sweden, you probably have Walloons in your ancestry. And these are actual images of the actual contracts that were signed, so they could be transported over to Sweden and work, and many of them intended to go back home, and many didn't, because they did have so many kids up in Sweden. So, in addition to that, we have a database of ironsmith court extractions. After farmers and military people, the next biggest group of laborers are miners, and they were like the Walloons, but because there were so many miners, and so many of them were actually foreign, German, Walloon, French, Scottish, they had their own court system. So a lot of times you won't find, even in Swedish probate records, for example, if they were a minor, they may be in the court records, the probate records of these minor courts. So let's take a look at a couple of these databases. Again, it's too much to go into too deep of detail, but let's take a look at first the Swedish Death Index. This is great because it's the only index that's actually available in English. The rest are all just in Swedish. But most of these databases have the exact same look to them. They have the left-hand side of the screen has a larger window, and then there's a different window on the right-hand side. And if I were to go down to this search button, for any of the other databases, it would just say "sök" instead of "search." So you can then put in whatever information you have and try and find their death record. Now, a couple of things about these databases that are set up in this format. They are not fuzzy seeking databases. That is, what you put in here is what they're going to look for. So if you're looking for Eriksson, the only thing you're going to want to put in here for the last name is an E and an R, because in almost all cases, after that, everything else could be something different. It could be ERI, ERIC, ERIK, ERS for Erschon. It could be so many different things. You just put in ER. You can put in occupation or title, but unless you know what Swedish occupation or title and that it's actually in the record that you're looking for, you don't want to put in the Swedish information. So you put in as little information as you can to use these databases. And then for the dates, you put in the year first, then a 2-digit month, then a 2-digit date. Or just put in the year, or leave it blank at first until you come back with 1,000 different names. But you know, you put in as little information as possible, because it's not only what is in the record itself, but what was extracted, and so consequently what is in the database. For place of birth or place of death, there is county, municipality, parish is probably the most common thing that you would use. On the right-hand side, you'll see these little boxes of things. And if you click on one, it shows you everything that is in the database. All of these are options that were used. So you can see this first one, there is someone with a last name of A. Well, that's not going to be their last name, obviously. There was probably, they just couldn't identify the rest of the letters in the name. So, and there are not just one, but there are apparently 56 people with that are indicated as only having the last name of A. And then the third one down, a daughter. Well, it probably, pretty certainly, it's Anders' daughter. But again, you don't know exactly how it's spelled. So, you know, again, less is more in this database. Liz, does that answer your question about how this is sort of laid out pretty well? All right, all right. So I'm just going to use one of my family names because it's a pretty unusual last name, a last name of Box. And it returns this collection of people. Here on the top, you can see there's 196 selected. So in in this collection between 1830 and 2020, there have been 196 people who have been identified with the last name of Box. Now, you see those are all listed on the left-hand side of the screen. On the right-hand side of the screen is more detail for each of these individuals. So the first person, Johanna Matilda Bergström, is highlighted, and then you see on the right-hand side, you see more information about Johanna Matilda Bergström. Well, I was looking for people with the last name of Box. Why Johanna Matilda Bergström? Because on the right-hand side, you see she was född. She was born a Box. So this record actually listed her with her maiden, with her married name rather than her maiden name. So you never know exactly. Sometimes you're going to want to search with a maiden name, and sometimes you're going to want to search with the married or maiden. And two other things on this screen. If you'll see print here, and you see up here in the upper right-hand corner a little print icon. If you select the print icon on the right-hand side, that's for printing or saving to a USB disk, the information on the right-hand side. If you select the print down here on the left-hand side, it selects for the left-hand side, the full list of names. So you can, it seems a little complicated, but in addition to this description that I'm giving you now, there's a 20-page guide sitting next to the computer in there, and each of these databases is laid out in more detail, and it kind of points you to all of this kind of information. So this is the easiest one to use and probably the most valuable database generally for most people, because of the death records. But beyond that, let's take a look at, this is Begravda i Sverige 2. And this is buried in Sweden, and it's a second edition of this, so they've added more people to it, because it now goes up to 2012. You'll notice that it's not, there's no capability, there's no little American flag up here in the right-hand corner that we always like to see, or British flag that we always like to see. But it's exactly the same layout as we just saw on that first one. So I don't think it's too difficult when, as I said, here's the search button, sök in this case, and it doesn't say last name, but it says efternamn and förnamn. Some of these might be a little more difficult to determine. Begravningsplats, what is that? Well, burial place. And then what does that even mean? Does that mean church cemetery? You would think it would in most cases. But all of these screens have been translated in that guide that's right next to the computer. So if you have any problems using this, you can find that. Let's take a look at my box family again and see if they come up. Well, of the 196 people, 79 of them still have markers apparently, and yeah. So one sort of interesting thing to note on this that is not included in the previous database is down here. There's a little button. It says Samma grav, the same grave. So what would that mean? Well, if it's a family grave, let's click on that and see what we have here. Well, there's 3 people buried in that grave. The person we were looking at, Elaine Olivia Maria Box, Johann Reinhold Box, and then a name that's not noted. So you can probably figure out that these are probably a couple, or there's a family involved in all of this. So this might help you in your research. Let's go ahead. Does anyone have any questions? Yes. So the question was, does this include only grave markers, or with where they've been noted, but there's no longer an existing grave marker? By and large, it's only existing grave markers. If you want to find their death information, then go to the death records. There's a couple of exceptions, I think, because this is a collection that was done by the Cemetery Association of Sweden with the Genealogical Society of Sweden. And so there may be some that are of high value interest to the Cemetery Association that don't necessarily have markers anymore, but by and large, I think, yes. Yes? Yes. So the question is Sweden like many other European countries where they reuse the graves? So even if there is a marker, it's only there for a short time. And the answer is yes, absolutely. It's usually about 40 years. Sometimes the lease is less, sometimes it's more, sometimes a gravestone will just hang around because there's no one to put in that plot. So, so you never know exactly how long they're going to stay, but unless the family pays to maintain that plot, then the graves will be reused. Again, with a few exceptions, there are some people who are considered to be historically important and so forth. Yeah. Oh. Well, yeah. So by and large, there's nothing there. If there is, there are some churchyards that have a place for putting bones. Yeah, but sorry. What do they do with the human remains if discovered? And the answer is usually there are none discovered. They're wooden boxes. It's been 40, 50 years, and things, worms happen, I guess. I think, yeah. I mean, I don't even know how much there was the update. I think the update only added things. I don't think anything has been taken away from the database, but I can't confirm that. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So the so the comment was that there are people who were buried inside churches, and when we have modernized the churches, that they often disturb the burial ground. So what happens with that? And I think it varies based on if it's someone of nobility or a king, that probably is they're going to be pretty careful about that. But maybe some other the bourgeois people who had enough money to get buried in the church but weren't all that. Maybe they just drilled through. I don't. I'm speculating now. Yeah, again, it's additional comments on use of reuse of burials within the church. So, okay, let's go on. I don't want to stretch this to take over your whole day. Here is one of the census. This is for the census for the year 2000. Couple of things about this. Most of these are also available someplace else. As soon as we bought these, ArkivDigital went out and graciously made available most of these on ArkivDigital, with the exception of the year 2000. So this is one that you still might use if you're looking for um, ancestors. I'll use my same family name of box. And again, here's the full list of people and more detail on the right-hand side. You'll notice on the bottom here, they have two little buttons, one same address or same property. And you can often assume probably that they will be family members. So here we have Robert Heinrich Box Schellbohm, born in 85, and then there are two people living in this household, Annika Marie Box and Shell Johnny Bertram Schellbohm. Those who were born in 62 and 54 respectively. You can probably guess that this is a family group of father, mother, and a child. And note here that the child is unmarried, but so are the parents. That's pretty common in Sweden. Marriage is not as common as it might be. I don't, I don't know what I'm saying there. All right. All right. One more database real quick. Rytmannen. And this one, actually, I'm going to show two more. Rytmannen, this is a little bit different than the other databases. And again, it's essential that you understand how the Ruta system works in Stockholm. The nice thing that this has that ArkivDigital's use of the database does not have is, first of all, there are Stockholm Maps. And when you get in and do a search of Röteman in Stockholm, you can actually go directly to a map which will show where your person was living, or the general area that your person was living in Stockholm, in a map generally associated with about the same time zone. So if it's 1885, well, let's go ahead and just quickly do one, do a search. I'm going to use my same guys. And here you see Karl Box Holmborg, and if I click on this, Källa means source, and eventually it will open up and it will show me the actual page of the Rytman information, and then going back, I don't have Stockholm people, so my people were all poor farmers. So where do we go here then? Okay, anyway, there we go. But we can also look and find a map, and it'll show exactly where this area is in Stockholm. So here we see that that person was living somewhere in this area of Stockholm. So that can be very helpful for you to find out, what property, what exists today, and whether there's any additional research that you should do. Yeah, questions? The Rutmannen was 18. Anyone have the actual date? It's 67 is what's coming to my mind, but it's late 60s, something like that. Is when all of these records started, the Rutman records started, as opposed to the household examination records. Just don't have the household examination. They look a lot alike, but okay. Stockholm cemeteries do tend to have more information and keep their burials longer than other parts of Sweden, but it varies pretty greatly. And let me just go on with that question a little bit further, because on the right-hand side here you see all the various parts of Stockholm. So if your family lived in Kungsholm, you can click on that, and each of these are little descriptions of churches, of schools, of hospitals. They're in Swedish, so you're going to have to translate them to English, but you can find out, if you know that your family was living in Kungsholm and was going to the folk school, then you can find out, here's a picture of the folk school, and the outside, even the inside of what the school looked like. Here's a description of the school overall, and then additional where you can find additional records. So this is a great additional source of information that isn't available on the ArkivDigital use um, of the Reutemann records. I think there was another question. Yes, sir. R-O-T, Reutemann is spelled R-O-T-E-M-A-N, and Mannen for the Reutemann. And, okay, let me close a couple of these screens here, and we'll go to that. There, I did mention that the court records, um, come on, let's see here. So the court records for the miners it's not actually a database. It's an extract of the information from the court records. So you actually have to do sort of a word search to try and find your family in it. It's not a word for word transcription, so they don't repeat things that the way court records, if you've ever gone through court records, they repeat things over and over again. They don't do that here, but there's still hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of material for anything that might happen. Swedes were fairly litigious people in the time, and so you're pretty likely to find your family in court records, if not as a subject, as a witness, or as involved in some form or manner. So these are great resources for your research on your miner folk. And there are 4 different collections here, and they're based on what part of the country that your family was living and mining, and those are detailed in the guide next to the computer, so you can figure out which of these databases to look in. And with that, yes. Okay, so anything to do with the mining industry is what these type of records cover, which, just to be clear, that means that if I was a shoemaker at a brook, at a industry that was dealing with mining, I'm a shoemaker. I'm not a miner, but I'm dealing with the mining industry. So I would be in these records rather than in the traditional records. Usually it's virtually everyone in a town is either covered in these records or in the regular court records. But you'll want to, if you can't find your people in one, check the others. So. But the others are not transcribed like these, so this is a good place to start. Jen. Yeah, so Bearsman would be in here, and Bearsman are sort of small industrial work. They kind of made iron as a small group of people. There'd be 5 or 6, 7 people. One would collect coal, one would do mining, and one would do the foundry work, and they would all get together and then sell their iron slightly processed iron to make money, and those are called Bergman. Um, it sounds like they would be miners rather than just because of the name mountain men or whatever, but they actually were more entrepreneurial, I would say. Yeah. The, these databases are available anytime. So anytime the library is open. Yep. Yep. And I would say, I mean, if you really need some of these, the reason we can only use one copy, the reason I have them on my computer is because I have my own personal copies because I use them a lot for doing research. So you can get them from Sweden if you really, if you're doing, a lot of death research or something, you may want to get your own collection. But yes, they are available here anytime. Any other questions? Any questions online? No? Okay. With that, I will turn it over to Wayne to close out the session.